Segregation, discrimination, and racism has been a part of the military since the Civil War era. Today, minority youths are most targeted for recruitment to the military. Lack of opportunity for employment and education makes them easier persuaded to join the military.
During World War II, African Americans joined the Army to escape the poverty that surrounded them. The war provided food and shelter, something they couldn't get at home. Another reason was that they wanted to be appreciated, and they thought that because they fought with the whites in the war, segregation would end. Their hope came true during the war. It was hard to be segregated when being attacked. As early as Pearl Harbor, blacks have been trying to destroy segregation by showing tremendous patriotism and courage. During Pearl Harbor, when the USS Arizona, a battleship, was sinking and being bombed, a black sailor who was a messman and had no training in combat took control of an anti-aircraft machine gun on the ship and started firing. He did not stop until all the ammunition was emptied. Only then did he abandon ship. The man's name was Dory Miller, and the Navy awarded him a Medal of Honor for his courage. But at home, discrimination was still as strong as ever. Blacks and whites were separated while training into different regiments, and the black regiments were given sticks instead of guns for training. After the war, minority soldiers returned home only to find a country that still did not give them full rights. Even though discrimination was not completely destroyed, minorities gained a lot of recognition. An analyst said after the war, "It doesn't matter what color you are. You work next to the next guy. Your life depended on him regardless of what color they are."
The Army, the Air Force, and the Marines excluded blacks totally at the beginning of the war. In the Navy, blacks served only as waiters. There was pressure from the home front to change this policy, therefore the Army formed all-black combat units. These all-black units could only be led by white officers because they believed that African American soldiers were mentally unfit to be battlefield officers and didn't believe blacks could acquire sufficient technical skills for certain tasks or provide leadership.
For those African Americans who did enlist or were drafted, segregation was a fact of life in all branches of the military during World War II. Yet, in the face of discrimination and often harsh treatment, all black units trained for combat and support at bases across North Carolina.
I knew that the Marine base was in North Carolina, and I figured that would put me closer to home.
Hubert Poole of Raleigh had 5 brothers in the Army, so he decided to join the Marines at the only African-American Marine base in the country, Montford Point.
They break you down to nothing. They make you feel like you are nobody. You yes sir, nobody, everybody. That you ran everywhere because they're gonna eventually bring you around to be a Marine and be proud of the Marine.
African Americans were an important source of manpower for the armed forces in World War II. By December 31st, 1945, a total of 1,056,841 African American registrants were inducted into the armed forces. Of these, 885,945 went into the Army, 153,224 into the Navy, 16,005 into the Marine Corps, and 1,667 into the Coast Guard. By July 1st of the next year, the number rose by the thousands.
The spirit of our Corps, embodied in the eagle, globe, and anchor, lives within the soul of every Marine. This spirit is born through arduous rite of passage at boot camp and officer training, after which a young man or woman is called a United States Marine for the first time. Our ethos has been shaped by ordinary men and women, patriots who showed extraordinary leadership and courage, both physical and moral.
From 1942 to 1949, approximately 20,000 African American men enlisted in the Marine Corps at a time when our nation was at war and the country and military services were resistant to integration. They came from the North and from the South, from all walks of life, They came for different reasons. Some wanted the challenge of being a Marine, some wanted to earn a living, but all came to protect and serve their country honorably. They arrived on a rugged and heavily wooded 5.5-acre site near Jacksonville, North Carolina, called Montford Point. The first group of these pioneering Marines built the now famous camp of wooden huts. Others that followed fell in on their handiwork. They braved a variety of threats, everything from the swagger sticks of tough drill instructors to the snakes and the mosquitoes, and even those bears that inhabited the land. In many cases, they were challenged harder than their white counterparts, entering the Corps at the same time.
These brave Marines served with honor during a critical period in our nation's history, fighting in some of the bloodiest struggles in the Pacific, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Some died in these epic island battles. Many others continued their service in the colds of Korea and the jungles of Vietnam. Many Montford Point veterans, men like Gilbert Hashmark Johnson, Edgar Huff, and Frederick C. Branch, are now legends in the rich history of the Marine Corps.
In June of 1942, I saw a newspaper article to the effect that the Marine Corps had begun accepting Negroes for service with the Corps.
Well, you can't think of being Marine without thinking about the Montford Pointers, because they are the beginning. You often question yourself, could I have done that? Could I have had the perseverance to come and to join an organization, first, that didn't want you, two, that had the history of being the last service to integration?
The Marine Corps, basically, in the early days, were looking for the best black men that they could find. Four corners of the country. We had men coming in who had their degrees. Some had both their degrees and had a couple of years in vocation. We call them the mighty platoon.
We knew we were being trained harder, and of course the DIs would tell us that they're going to make us superior to all of the other white Marines, particularly. In fact, as a matter of fact, we were breaking every record that they ever had because they pushed us to the end of our endurance to where we just couldn't go any further.
You think about where they came and why they came. Many of them were doing just fine where they are. Some were educators, some were professional ball players, some even owned their own business. Some were farmers, and some were just working in factories. But they came because they felt in their heart of hearts that our nation needed their support, needed them to be a part of what was good about America. And a lot of them felt that when they came, or when they provided their contributions, that somehow that they would convince the world, as well as America, that they had earned the right to all of the rights and privileges there are of being Americans.
However, American minorities felt a contradiction in the wartime experience. While they were fighting overseas to save democracy, freedoms at home were still limited for people of color. Toward the end of the war, President Eisenhower ordered the integration of armed forces. African Americans were treated more fairly in foreign countries than in the United States, and in the military they were given opportunities to develop skills and show their abilities. These opportunities were generally not provided on the home front. Minority soldiers who had been heroes returned to much the same lives they had lived before being drafted, but readjusting was difficult for them.